Lieutenant Sarah Chen had always been the quiet one. In the bustling corridors of the Galactic Defense Station Omega, she moved like a shadow between the towering Krillian warriors and the boastful Centaurian pilots. At barely 5 feet tall, with her dark hair always pulled back in a simple ponytail, she seemed to disappear among her alien colleagues. The other species in the Galactic Alliance had their opinions about humans. The Krillians, with their 8-foot frames and natural armor plating, saw humans as fragile creatures better suited for desk work. The Centaurians, who could fly through space without ships thanks to their bioengineered wings, thought humans were too slow and clumsy for real combat. Even the peaceful Morvac, despite their diplomatic nature, often patted humans on the head like pet animals when they accomplished something noteworthy. Sarah had heard all the whispers. In the mess hall, she caught fragments of conversations in various alien languages, but the universal translators made their meaning clear. Weak, cowardly. Why do they even bother with military service? The comments stung, but she kept her head down and focused on her work. Her assignment to the reconnaissance division seemed to confirm everyone's suspicions. While other species charged into battle or piloted massive warships, humans like Sarah were given the safe jobs, scanning distant planets, monitoring communication signals, and filing reports that few bothered to read. Captain Vexus Tar, a Krillian whose scarred carapace told stories of countless battles, barely acknowledged her existence during briefings. When he did speak to her, his tone suggested he was humoring a child. "Chen, your mission is simple," he would say, his 4 eyes looking anywhere but at her. "Take the stealth scout ship to the Kepler 442 system. Long-range sensors detected some unusual energy readings. Probably nothing dangerous, but we need confirmation for the records." The other officers in the briefing room, a mix of battle-hardened Krillians and cocky Centaurian aces, barely glanced up from their tactical displays. This was routine work, the kind of milk run they assigned to humans to keep them busy while the real warriors handled important matters. Sarah simply nodded and collected her mission parameters. She had learned not to ask questions or offer suggestions. The few times she had tried, her alien colleagues had exchanged those looks, the universal expression that said, "How cute, the human thinks it has ideas." Her quarters on the station were small but functional. The walls were lined with books, actual paper books that she had smuggled aboard despite the weight restrictions. While other species relied entirely on digital archives, Sarah found comfort in the physical act of turning pages. Tonight, as she prepared for her mission, she ran her fingers along the worn spines of her collection. Military histories, survival guides, and her grandmother's journal from the early days of human space exploration. Her grandmother, Captain Elena Chen, had been among the first humans to make contact with alien species. Sarah had grown up on stories of those early encounters, when humans were unknown quantities in the galaxy. Back then, their determination had surprised everyone. But that was decades ago, and now humans had been categorized, filed away in the galactic consciousness as the support species. The next morning, Sarah made her way to the hangar bay. Her assigned ship, the Whisper, was a small reconnaissance vessel designed for stealth rather than combat. Its hull was coated with adaptive camouflage plating that could mimic the background of space itself. The ship's AI, designated Arya, greeted her with its calm, synthesized voice. "Good morning, Lieutenant Chen. All systems are nominal. Estimated travel time to Kepler 442 is 18 hours. Thank you, Arya. Let's run through the pre-flight checklist." As Sarah worked through the familiar routine of system checks and navigation plotting, she noticed a small crowd gathering near the hangar bay entrance. A group of Centaurian pilots was placing bets on something, their rapid chittering filling the air with excitement. "What's the commotion about?" Sarah asked one of the hangar technicians, a young Morvac named Pol 10. The purple-skinned alien's tentacle-like appendages waved in what Sarah recognized as embarrassment. They're betting on whether you'll turn back before reaching the target system." Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her voice steady. "I see. And what are the odds?" 3 to 1 that you'll abort the mission citing equipment failure," Polton admitted quietly. 5 to 1 that you'll never even leave the solar system." "Interesting," Sarah said, her tone neutral. She had learned to hide her emotions around her colleagues, but inside, something cold and hard was forming. "Well, I suppose they'll find out soon enough." The Centaurian's laughter echoed through the hangar as Sarah sealed the Whisper's airlock. She strapped herself into the pilot's seat and initiated the launch sequence. The ship's engines hummed to life, and she felt the familiar sensation of the artificial gravity shifting as they cleared the station's docking bay. As the Whisper slipped into hyperspace, Sarah allowed herself a moment to feel the anger she had been suppressing. They thought she was a coward. They thought humans were weak, suited only for safe, boring assignments. They had no idea what they were about to learn. The journey to Kepler 442 passed uneventfully. Sarah spent the time reviewing her mission parameters and studying the system's star charts. Kepler 442 was a binary star system with 7 planets, most of them barren rocks. The 4th planet, designated Kepler 442d, had shown the unusual energy signatures that prompted this investigation. As the Whisper dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, Sarah immediately knew something was wrong. Her long-range sensors were painting a picture that didn't match the mission briefing. Area. Confirm sensor readings. Are we detecting artificial structures in this system? Confirmed, Lieutenant. I am detecting multiple artificial constructs throughout the system. Configuration and design do not match any known Galactic Alliance technology. Sarah's blood ran cold. The system wasn't empty as intelligence had suggested. Someone was here, someone who didn't belong to the Alliance. She activated the ship's stealth systems and began moving deeper into the system for a closer look. What she found changed everything. Massive construction platforms floated in the void between planets, building ships unlike anything in the Alliance database. The vessels were sleek and angular, with weapon arrays that made even Krillian battleships look like toys. But it wasn't just the ships that caught her attention, it was the sheer scale of the operation. This wasn't a simple military outpost. This was a full-scale invasion fleet. Sarah began recording everything, her fingers flying over the sensor controls as she documented ship designs, tactical formations, and construction rates. The enemy, and she had no doubt that's what they were, had been building here for months, possibly years. The fleet she was looking at could crush the Alliance's defenses in a matter of days. As she moved closer to get better readings, proximity alarms began screaming through the cockpit. A patrol ship had detected her presence and was moving to intercept. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she realized the terrible choice before her. She could run, turn around, jump back to hyperspace, and report what she had found. The safe choice. The choice everyone expected a human to make. Or she could stay and gather the intelligence that might save billions of lives. The enemy patrol ship was closing fast, its weapons charging. Sarah looked at her own ship's pathetic defensive systems, a single light cannon that would be useless against real warships. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. Instead, she did something that would have surprised every alien who thought they knew what humans were capable of. She dove deeper into the system. Arya. Plot a course through the construction platforms. Use the industrial traffic to mask our signature. Lieutenant, that course will take us directly through multiple weapons ranges. The probability of detection approaches certainty. I know, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. But we need those detailed scans. The Alliance needs to know exactly what they're facing. What happened next would be recorded in her post-mission report, the report that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. But as Sarah piloted her tiny ship into the heart of the enemy fleet, dodging patrol craft and recording every detail she could, she wasn't thinking about changing perceptions. She was thinking about her grandmother's stories, about the early human explorers who had ventured into the unknown not because they weren't afraid, but because they were afraid and went anyway. The enemy had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that because the Alliance underestimated humans, humans were actually as weak as they appeared. They had no idea that sometimes the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, were the most dangerous of all. Sarah Chen was about to teach the galaxy a lesson about human courage, and the first class was about to begin. The Whisper shuddered as enemy scanner beams swept past its hull. Sarah held her breath, watching the stealth system indicators flicker between green and amber. One solid lock from those patrol ships and her mission would be over in a spectacular explosion. Hull temperature approaching critical levels, Arya reported with its characteristic calm. Stealth plating efficiency down to 67%. Sarah gritted her teeth and adjusted their trajectory, using a massive construction platform as cover. Through the viewports, she could see the enemy ships up close now, sleek predators with weapon arrays that could vaporize anything the Alliance currently fielded. The beings building them moved with military precision, their forms hidden behind environmental suits that revealed nothing about their species. Beginning detailed tactical analysis, Sarah whispered, more to herself than to Arya. Her fingers danced across the recording equipment as she documented everything: ship classifications, weapons loadouts, shield configurations, engine signatures. Every piece of data could mean the difference between the Alliance surviving or falling to this unknown threat. A proximity alarm chimed softly. Another patrol was approaching their position. Sarah watched the tactical display as 3 enemy ships formed a search pattern around the construction platform. They moved like hunters, methodically checking every hiding spot. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they reached her position behind the massive industrial framework. Most reconnaissance pilots would have run. The smart play was to escape with what data they already had. But Sarah realized something that made her stomach clench with fear and determination in equal measure. This might be the Alliance's only chance to gather this intelligence. The enemy clearly didn't expect their hidden base to be discovered. Their security was focused on keeping ships out of the system, not hunting down infiltrators who had already made it past their perimeter. Once they knew the Alliance was aware of their presence, they would either accelerate their invasion timeline or relocate entirely. Sarah made a decision that would have horrified her superiors. She powered down all non-essential systems, including life support, and allowed the Whisper to drift like space debris while the patrol ships searched around her. Her breath fogged in the rapidly cooling cockpit as she manually operated the sensors, recording everything she could see. The patrol ships passed within 100 meters of her position, their crews apparently satisfied that the readings they had detected were sensor ghosts or background radiation. As soon as they moved on, Sarah reactivated life support and began breathing again, her hands shaking slightly from the cold and adrenaline. "That was inadvisable, Lieutenant," Arya commented. "Your life signs indicated significant physiological stress. Sometimes stress is the price of doing the job right," Sarah replied, resuming her surveillance of the enemy fleet. Over the next 6 hours, she documented everything. The enemy had built a force of over 300 warships, each one more advanced than anything in the Alliance fleet. But more importantly, she began to understand their strategy. The ships weren't just weapons, they were specialized. She identified troop transports designed for planetary assault, electronic warfare vessels meant to disrupt communications, and massive dreadnoughts whose only purpose was breaking through defensive positions. This wasn't just an invasion force. It was a conquest fleet, designed to capture and hold territory. But as Sarah watched their operations, she began to notice something else. The enemy, whoever they were, fought like the rest of the galaxy expected warfare to work. Massive ships, overwhelming firepower, direct confrontation. They were building a fleet to fight Krillian battle tactics and Zentorian ace pilots. They weren't building a fleet to fight humans, because nobody expected humans to fight at all. Sarah's mind raced as she considered the implications. The galaxy had spent decades categorizing species by their obvious strengths. Krillians were tanks, Zentorians were fighters, Morvacs were diplomats, and humans were support staff. But what if that perception was humanity's greatest advantage? A new alarm interrupted her thoughts. Long-range sensors were detecting incoming ships, a massive convoy arriving at the edge of the system. Sarah adjusted her position to get a better view and felt her heart sink. The newcomers weren't more construction ships. They were command vessels, their hulls decorated with symbols that could only be fleet insignia. The invasion force wasn't just preparing for war anymore. Leadership had arrived, which meant the war was about to begin. Sarah recorded the arrival of what appeared to be a flagship, a vessel easily twice the size of the largest Alliance dreadnought. As it took position at the center of the fleet formation, she detected communication bursts between the ships. Whatever language they were using didn't register on the universal translators, but the pattern was clear enough. Final orders were being transmitted. "Time to go," Sarah muttered, beginning to plot an escape route that would take her back to the system's edge. She had what she came for: detailed intelligence on an invasion fleet that could devastate the Alliance if it caught them unprepared. But as she prepared to activate the hyperspace drive, her sensors detected something that made her blood freeze. A test firing. The flagship's main weapon array lit up like a miniature star, sending a beam of coherent energy across the system to strike one of the barren outer planets. The planet's crust cracked like an eggshell, magma fountains erupting through the fractures as the world's core destabilized. Sarah stared in horror as the planet began to break apart. The weapon wasn't just powerful, it was designed to destroy entire worlds. She immediately understood the enemy's strategy now. They weren't planning to invade and occupy Alliance territory. They were planning to sterilize it. The communication patterns between enemy ships intensified, and Sarah's translation software finally managed to decode fragments of their language. What she heard made her hands tremble as she recorded it. Cleansing begins in 72 standard hours. No survivors from the infection zones. Prepare the purification fleet for immediate deployment. Infection zones. They weren't talking about conquest, they were talking about extermination. Every member species of the Alliance was apparently considered some kind of contamination that needed to be eliminated. Sarah had stumbled onto something far worse than an invasion. This was genocide on a galactic scale. As she processed this horrifying revelation, another proximity alarm activated. A patrol ship had detected her energy signature when she powered up the hyperspace drive. It was moving to investigate, and this time there was nowhere to hide. Sarah found herself facing the same choice that had defined this entire mission: run or stay. She could escape now with the intelligence she had gathered. It would be enough to warn the Alliance, maybe enough to prepare some kind of defense. It was the safe choice, the logical choice. But she also realized that she was probably the only person who would ever get this close to the enemy command structure. Her recordings had captured their tactical formations, weapon capabilities, and now their timeline. But there was still more to learn. The enemy flagship was preparing to address the entire fleet, some kind of final briefing before they departed for Alliance territory. If she could record that briefing, she might learn their target priorities, their route of attack, maybe even weaknesses in their strategy. The patrol ship was closing fast. Sarah looked at her pitiful defensive systems, then at the massive enemy fleet surrounding her. Every rational calculation said she should run. Instead, she shut down the hyperspace drive and rerouted all power to the stealth systems. Area, prepare for extended covert operations. We're staying for the briefing. Lieutenant, our current position is untenable. The probability of detection increases exponentially with time. Sarah's hands moved across the controls, finding hiding spots among the construction debris and industrial equipment floating around the platform. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks to get the job done. What she didn't mention to Arya was that this wasn't really a calculated risk. This was a desperate gamble based on nothing more than stubborn determination and the growing realization that someone had to bear witness to what was about to happen to the galaxy. As the enemy flagship began its broadcast to the assembled fleet, Sarah positioned the whisper to record every word. She had no idea if she would survive long enough to deliver this intelligence to the Alliance, but she was going to make sure that if humanity's enemies expected them to be cowards, they were going to be very, very wrong. The briefing was about to begin, and Sarah Chen was about to discover just how much courage she actually possessed. The enemy commander's voice echoed across the fleet communications as Sarah recorded every word. Through her translation software, she heard the chilling details of their plan. The Alliance's core worlds would be hit first, the heavily populated systems where billions of beings lived and worked, believing themselves safe behind their defensive fleets. The contamination has spread too far, the alien commander declared. These so-called civilized species have poisoned the galaxy with their weakness, their cooperation, their disgusting peace. We will cleanse every world they have touched. Sarah's blood ran cold as star maps appeared on her tactical display, showing the enemy's planned routes of attack. They had studied the Alliance for years, mapping every trade route, every defensive position, every population center. This wasn't a hastily planned invasion, it was a methodical extermination campaign. But as she listened to the briefing, Sarah began to notice something crucial. The enemy spoke extensively about crushing Krillian defenses and overwhelming Zentorian fighter squadrons. They had detailed plans for countering Morvac diplomatic initiatives and neutralizing Thoraxian industrial capabilities. They never mentioned humans at all. To them, humanity was so irrelevant that they hadn't even bothered planning for human resistance. In their minds, humans were just another weak species that would die alongside their alien allies. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest tactical mistake in galactic history. As the briefing concluded and the enemy fleet began final preparations for departure, Sarah realized her opportunity was about to disappear. The patrol ship that had been hunting for her was moving away, probably assuming her energy signature had been a sensor malfunction. She could power up her engines and escape now with intelligence that would save billions of lives. But then she noticed something that changed everything. The enemy flagship's shields had dropped momentarily as it reconfigured for hyperspace travel. For exactly 43 seconds, the massive vessel's communication arrays would be vulnerable to a carefully targeted transmission. Sarah stared at her console, her mind racing through possibilities. She could transmit a virus into their communications network, not enough to cause serious damage, but enough to potentially track their fleet movements once they entered Alliance space. It would give the Alliance Defense Forces precious early warning of where the attacks would come from. The problem was that transmitting anything would instantly reveal her position to every enemy ship in the system. She would be vaporized within seconds. Sarah looked at the data she had already collected. Her recordings contained everything the Alliance needed to know about this threat: ship designs, weapon capabilities, tactical doctrine, target priorities, and timeline. If she ran now, that intelligence would reach Alliance Command and save countless lives. But if she stayed for those 43 seconds, she might save even more. "Area," she said quietly. "Prepare a data packet containing the tactical virus from our electronic warfare suite. Target the flagship's primary communication array. Lieutenant, such an action will result in immediate detection and destruction of this vessel. Our survival probability would be effectively 0. Sarah's hands moved to the transmission controls, her grandmother's words echoing in her memory. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is something that terrifies you. Calculate transmission window for maximum penetration of enemy network. 37 seconds optimal window begins in." Mark. Sarah watched the countdown timer, her finger hovering over the transmission key. 37 seconds to change the course of a galactic war. 37 seconds to prove that humans weren't the cowards everyone believed them to be. At 15 seconds, she almost activated the hyperspace drive instead. The smart choice. The safe choice. At 10 seconds, she thought about all the beings in Alliance space who had no idea what was coming for them. At 5 seconds, she thought about the Zentorian pilots who had bet against her courage. At 0, Sarah Chen pressed the transmission key and changed the galaxy forever. The virus packet shot across space faster than light, penetrating the enemy flagship's communication network in the brief window when their shields were down. Instantly, alarms began screaming throughout the enemy fleet as they detected the unauthorized transmission. Sarah didn't wait to see their response. She slammed the hyperspace activation control and felt the familiar sensation of space folding around the Whisper. Energy beams and missile volleys filled the space where her ship had been milliseconds earlier, but she was already gone, racing back toward Alliance space with intelligence that would rewrite military doctrine. The journey home took 18 hours. Sarah spent every moment of it refining her report, organizing the data she had collected, and preparing to deliver news that would shock the galaxy. She also monitored the virus she had planted in the enemy network, watching as it traced their fleet movements and transmission patterns. When the Whisper finally dropped out of hyperspace near Defense Station Omega, Sarah immediately transmitted priority emergency codes. Within minutes, every senior officer on the station was assembled in the main briefing room, waiting to hear her report. Captain Vextar looked annoyed as Sarah entered the briefing room. "Chen, your mission was supposed to be a simple survey. Why are you transmitting emergency codes?" The other officers, Krillians, Zentorians, Morvax, and a few other species regarded her with the same mixture of impatience and condescension she had grown used to. They expected another routine report from their token human. Sarah activated the main display and began her presentation. "Sirs, I have discovered a hostile force of over 300 advanced warships preparing to launch an extermination campaign against all Alliance member species. Attack begins in approximately 50 hours. The room erupted in disbelief. Captain Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical displays Sarah was projecting. These readings, these weapon signatures. "Chen, where exactly did you obtain this intelligence?" "I penetrated their construction base in the Kepler 442 system and conducted 6 hours of detailed surveillance from within their fleet formation." The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien officer in the room stared at Sarah as if she had claimed to wrestle a star. Commander Zephyr, one of the Zentorian aces who had bet against her mission's success, spoke first. You flew a reconnaissance ship into the middle of an enemy fleet? That's impossible. No pilot would be that reckless." Sarah continued her presentation, displaying the detailed scans of enemy ships, their tactical formations, and the horrifying recording of their commander's briefing. As the evidence mounted, the expressions around the table changed from disbelief to shock to something approaching awe. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "I was able to plant a tracking virus in their communication network. Current data suggests they will attack the Rigel sector first, followed by the core world's defense perimeter. Captain Vexistar's scarred carapace seemed to shimmer as he processed the implications. The defensive value of this intelligence is incalculable. Chen, you realize you should have been killed dozens of times during this mission? Yes, sir. I was aware of the risks. Then why didn't you retreat when you encountered enemy forces? Sarah looked around the room at the faces of officers who had spent years underestimating her and her entire species. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady. Because the mission required completion, sir. Because billions of lives depended on gathering this intelligence. And because someone had to do it. The room fell silent again. Finally, Commander Zephyr cleared his throat. Chen, how exactly did you manage to avoid detection for so long? Their sensor technology appears far superior to ours. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. I used techniques that the enemy wasn't expecting, sir. They planned their security around stopping direct assault tactics and ace pilot maneuvers. They weren't prepared for someone who would shut down life support and drift like debris for hours, or who would stay hidden instead of engaging when detected. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. Every species in the Alliance fought according to their nature. Krillians charged forward with overwhelming force. Zentorians relied on speed and agility. Morvax used diplomacy and misdirection. But humans adapted. They survived. They endured things that would break other species and found ways to win through sheer, stubborn persistence. Over the next few hours, Sarah's report circulated through Alliance Command. The response was unlike anything in galactic military history. Every available ship was recalled to defensive positions. Manufacturing centers began working around the clock to produce weapons based on her intelligence about enemy shield frequencies. Most importantly, human reconnaissance pilots found themselves suddenly in high demand. It turned out that what the galaxy had mistaken for cowardice was actually humanity's greatest military asset. While other species fought according to predictable patterns, humans could be anywhere, doing anything, surviving impossible odds through determination and adaptability. The enemy fleet arrived exactly when Sarah's intelligence predicted it would, but instead of facing the unprepared, scattered Alliance forces they expected, they found coordinated defensive positions, weapons calibrated to penetrate their shields, and most terrifying of all, human reconnaissance pilots who seemed to appear out of nowhere to provide real-time tactical intelligence. The war that followed lasted 3 years, but the outcome was never really in doubt after Sarah's mission. The enemy had planned to fight the Alliance they thought they knew, strong but predictable, powerful but inflexible. They had no idea how to fight an alliance that included humans who refused to stay defeated, who found ways to survive in impossible situations, and who possessed a kind of quiet courage that could change the course of galactic history. Lieutenant Sarah Chen received more decorations than any human in Alliance history, but the recognition she treasured most came from an unexpected source. Commander Zephyr approached her after the war ended, his proud Zentorian bearing subdued with something that looked like shame. Chen, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. We all do. We never understood what human courage actually looked like. Sarah considered his words for a moment. It's not that you misunderstood human courage, sir. It's that you misunderstood courage itself. Real courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. As the years passed, military academies throughout the Alliance began teaching a new doctrine based on the lessons learned from Sarah's mission. They called it human tactics, the art of victory through adaptation, persistence, and the kind of quiet bravery that doesn't announce itself with roars or battle cries. The galaxy learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who don't look dangerous at all, and sometimes the greatest heroes are the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who do what needs to be done simply because someone has to do it. Sarah Chen had shown the galaxy what humans were truly capable of, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.